All right, listen up. If you're not sure where the line is between being a loving spouse who looks for opportunities to care for and selflessly serve their partner and being a people pleaser who does the very same things but out of a motivation of obligation or fear, this video is for you. Or if you feel like you tend to get in relationships where you give way more than you receive, or if you feel like your partner takes advantage of your kindness, or if you have a hard time saying the word no, then this video is for you. Today what I want to talk about is what it looks like to be a people pleaser. So how do we evaluate if we might be a people pleaser? What is maybe driving us to do that? And then what to do about it? That's today on Relation Shots. Hey, welcome to Relation Shots. My name's Eric Wooten. If this is your first time hanging out with us, welcome to the place to get practical relationship advice that actually works in your relationship. If you've not already done so, go ahead and click the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss any upcoming videos. If you want a free guide to intimacy, you'll see a link in the description area below. If you need any other resources to help strengthen your relationship, check out the description area below. You'll see our membership, you'll see links for our masterclasses, books, free resources, blog, all kinds of stuff that can help you strengthen your relationship. So let's talk about this idea of people pleasing, and when does real caring, loving your spouse go too far and turn into a motivation that is not that healthy. Now, you know, with lots of areas of relationship, there's a real thin line sometimes between healthy and unhealthy behavior, because not everything relationship related is just cut and dry, black and white. Everything can't be just prescriptive for everybody because we're all so unique, we're all so different. Every relationship is different. And so there's many areas where there's this fine line, and sometimes we don't know when we've crossed into unhealthy. And today we want to try to figure that out. So if you just think about relationship in general, right? There's the idea that it is healthy to lean on and depend on your spouse in marriage, but codependency, which is going too far, is not healthy, right? In marriage, it's healthy to have an individual identity and some level of independence because you're still a person. But it goes too far if you're completely autonomous and you have no concern for how your behaviors or actions impact your spouse and you don't talk to him about anything. That's not healthy, right? In marriage, some level of privacy is healthy. Having my own journal or diary that my spouse doesn't look like, or private conversations with healthy friendships, that's healthy. But secrecy or having areas of your life that you do not allow your spouse access to, that's unhealthy. And on we could do 100 examples of that, but you get the point. There's a thin line sometimes between healthy and unhealthy, and today's topic is no different. Right? It's sometimes hard to tell when the concept of, if you're a person of faith, the Bible talks about this concept of submission in marriage, submitting yourself to another person. There's also lots of verses that talk about do not think merely of yourself, but think of the interest of others. Do not think more highly of yourself than you ought to. So there's this concept for people of faith, certainly, that we should prioritize our spouse over our own desires, right? And so there's times we want to do that. There's times we want to serve selflessly. We want to give unconditionally, not just based on what we get in return. I've done a whole video on why fairness does not work in relationships. So, but then where does the line cross when we're giving so much of ourselves that now we're in an unhealthy place and it's not being reciprocated at all, and we're actually in a relationship that's not healthy anymore, but it's become toxic? So today I want to give you some questions to do self-evaluation. We're going to go through some questions where you can evaluate if maybe you are a people pleaser. Then we're going to talk about what might be motivating that, and then we're going to talk about, if that's the truth, how do we begin moving out of that position so that we can have a healthy marriage or healthy dating relationship? So let's talk about some questions to help evaluate whether or not you might be a people pleaser. Do you have a hard time saying no when your partner asks you to do something? Do you worry a lot about disappointing them or worry they'll leave you? Do you bend over backwards for them, often at your own expense? Do you do some things because of a feeling of obligation and then feel resentful afterwards? Are you afraid that if you don't take care of them, they'll think you're not nice? Do you avoid speaking up for yourself or voicing your opinion because you're afraid of conflict? Do you let your partner take advantage of you? And when I say that, I'm not talking sexually. I mean of your time, of your energy. Do you just allow them to keep take, even when you're past the point of being able to give? Now, if you answered yes to more of those questions than you answered no to, then you may be leaning over into being driven to give in a relationship simply because you're a people pleaser and it's not coming out of a healthy place, and you need to evaluate how you might change that. See, oftentimes the reason we're people pleasers is because we're driven by some type of fear. Maybe fear of that person leaving you in the relationship, fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of not being liked by that person, fear of them retaliating if they don't like what you're not doing for them. And so oftentimes we have these fears that are driving us, and to overcome the fear, sometimes we just got to see ourselves in the situation of our greatest fear. Like if your fear is, oh my gosh, if I don't do everything right, if I don't keep them happy, if I don't please them all the time, they will leave me. Well, then picture yourself single. You'll be okay. I promise you, you won't be the first person whose relationship ended. You will not be the last person whose relationship ended. Hopefully you have good friendships around you, good family who can support you. If not, there's tons of groups that can support somebody through the loss of a relationship. And I'm not saying that is the case, but sometimes you just have to go, that's the worst that can happen. And you know what? If the worst happens, I will be okay. So I do not need to be driven by my fear. If you're driven by your fear and you're trying to people please, you will not have the ability to have a healthy relationship. You will not have the ability to set the right boundaries in your relationship. If you're people pleasing, you're going to continue in an unhealthy, dysfunctional relationship. So if you self-diagnosed as a people pleaser based on the questions we just looked at, the question is, what do you do next? So I want to give you 4 thoughts on how you can begin moving from the unhealthy side of people pleasing across the line to I'm serving and loving and putting my partner first because I care about them and I'm doing it from a healthy place. So 4 thoughts on what you can do to begin that journey back over the right side, the healthy side of the line. Number 1 would just be increase your self-esteem. Now, a lot of times we have not done the self-work, and so we end up in a relationship and we think we don't deserve to have our voice heard, and so we don't say anything. We don't feel valuable enough in ourselves that maybe we think, oh, we're just lucky that someone finally loved us. Or maybe you grew up in a home where you had no voice, and so you have bought into the lie that you don't have a voice, you don't get a voice, your voice is not important. I'm telling you it is. And so sometimes we got to do the self-work to be able to get ourselves to a place in a relationship where you go, listen, I'm valuable, and so I deserve to be treated well. And if that's not how you viewed yourself, then I would encourage you to get with a counselor, read some books, talk to some friends, but get to a place where you can grow your self-worth so that you can actually speak about what you desire and what you need in a relationship. So that's the first thought, would just be to increase your self-esteem. The second thought would be to set healthy boundaries in the relationship, right? You are not responsible for your partner's behavior, for their attitudes, for their bad behavior, for their burdens. You are not responsible to carry all of their burdens when they try to put it on you. The idea of healthy boundaries is a boundary says, this is what I own, and that's what you own on that side of the boundary. And so a lot of times in an unhealthy people-pleasing relationship, you don't set boundaries. You take on all their burdens. They don't take on any of your burdens. And so you're carrying the burdens for both, and that's not a healthy place. You have to be willing to set healthy boundaries that says, this is what I own, that's what you own. And sometimes that's going to be difficult, and sometimes the person's going to push back if you've never done that. But you've got to be willing to set healthy boundaries in the relationship so you're not carrying more than you're equipped to carry, which really leads me into number 3, because this is a boundary you need to set, but you need to practice saying no. Some of you have a hard time saying no in the relationship. And listen, I don't care what that looks like to begin practicing, but practice in small things. Listen, role play with a friend if you need to. Sit down with your friend, have them ask you something, and listen to the sound of no rolling off your tongue. Listen to the sound of you saying no and setting a boundary, not because you're just doing it to be spiteful, but because you don't have the capacity to do what is being asked of you in that moment. And sometimes we try to start saying no in the difficult things. Listen, if you have not been saying no, you're not going to jump from no no's to difficult no's. So start with easy no's. Start with no's in the little things. Your partner's probably not going to push back a whole lot when you say no to a little thing, rather than jumping from nothing to no in a big thing. So you need to get used to saying no. No is a word that's okay. No is a way to set boundaries and protect yourself. No is a way to communicate to another person, I'm not interested in doing that. And it's okay. Now, I'm not saying you're going to have a healthy relationship where one person says no to the other person all the time, but there are times where I have to say, no, I don't feel like going to XYZ concert with you. I don't really like it. That's not enjoyable for me. Why don't you take a friend? That's okay every once in a while. Now, sometimes we do what we don't want to do because that's part of compromising a relationship, but it's okay to say no sometimes. And number 4 is remember that relationships are mutual. See, sometimes you've been in so many relationships that are not reciprocal or mutual, and so you have forgotten that it actually is supposed to be some give and take in a relationship. You do deserve that in a relationship. I don't know if somewhere along the line you bought into that lie like we talked about before, that you're just lucky that this person wants to be with you, or you think that they're better than you are and so you're just happy to be in a relationship. Listen, you deserve a good, healthy relationship where somebody values you, prioritizes you, and puts you first. You deserve that. I feel like Stuart, or what's the guy, Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live, what, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you. But it's true. You deserve a great relationship. You're worth that. And if you have forgotten that this is supposed to be mutual, you need to be reminded relationships are mutual. Submission is mutual. Reciprocation is mutual. Loving one another is mutual. You need to remember that for a relationship if you've forgotten that. So that is how we begin moving from, this doesn't happen overnight. If you're a people pleaser, you've probably been doing this for a long time. This is going to be scary. This might be hard at first, but you've got to begin moving from a place of operating in relationships out of fear and an unhealthy motivation to please the other person, to operating from healthy place that you're whole, you're healthy, and you're loving and making choices to serve selflessly. You're making choices to sometimes put the person in front of your own interests, not out of obligation so that you're resentful later, but because you're in a healthy place and you care about them and want to see them do well. So there's a few ideas on how to evaluate if you might be a people pleaser, where that thin line is of healthy to unhealthy, and what you can begin doing to walk away from an unhealthy place into a healthy place in relationships. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment in the section below. If we can help you in any area of your relationship, check out all the links in the description area below. We'd love to walk with you on your relationship journey. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on Relation Shots.